Hi. So by now you've read the headlines, you've seen the headlines, and you've probably had to talk yourself. So I decided I'd talk about it too. Hi, I'm Dr. Lorenzo Neal, and welcome to my channel. If you haven't done so, I want to invite you to hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications when I upload new videos. So we're talking about Bill Cosby being released from prison and the reaction that is occurring across America, but particularly with Black America. 2004, um, he was accused of having inappropriate sexual uh, activity, engagement, indecency with a former Temple University employee, and charges were brought against him in a civil suit to which he settled for, I believe, $3 million. And the prosecutor, the attorney at the time, stated that by testifying in this deposition that he would be immune. He would have immunity from further jurisprudence. That no other actions would be brought against him. However, when that prosecutor left, a new prosecutor brought in, and in 2015, there were charges brought against him. He was sentenced to those charges stemming from the 2004 incident in 2018. So he was serving, he'd only served roughly 2 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned the ruling and the decisions of both the lower courts, stating that Bill Cosby, did not receive due process. And that is an interesting technicality for him to get off. He was promised something and they did not follow through with the promise, and he had some good lawyers that got him free. So there are some issues that we have to address that I like to bring up. The first is the issue of privilege, wealth, and justice. As you may know, the United States criminal justice system is terribly flawed. However, every now and then, there are some who manage to find a way to allow those flaws to work to their advantage. When it comes to Black men in particular, the system is terribly skewed towards injustice. It doesn't matter where you stand on a political ideology. We know that for a great deal of Black men who encounter the legal system and the criminal justice system in this country usually have negative outcomes. That means that they could be arrested, they could be incarcerated for a period of time, or they could face an excessive amount of fines. But we have history of a few Black privileged men who have used the flaws of the criminal justice system to their advantage. And when I say to their advantage, I'm not saying that they actually used the system, but the privilege, the wealth that was afforded to them allowed them to get them access to some of the best lawyers that money could buy. And with that wealth and that privilege, there was a little bit of favor towards them. And we see some also with money, wealth, and privilege allow that money, wealth, and privilege to get them in too much trouble, where even the legal system and its flaws, the criminal justice system and its flaws, does not work for them. And there are a lot of wannabe Al Capones, Teflon Dons. There are a lot of wannabe Teflon Dons, but that's not the case. So in the case of Dr. Cosby, what we see is privilege and wealth in favor of a Black person, a Black man. Now, this is not negating the fact that what he did was horrendous. This is not negating the fact that his victims are still going to be affected by that. The resources that were available to him are not always available to the average black man when they come into the legal system of the United States. So there's that one thing. The second thing is the idea of victimhood. Now, there were at least 50 women who brought accusations against Dr. Cosby, stemming back as far as the 60s. And the statute of limitations had expired, but they still shared their story of some similarity and some pattern of behavior that he had developed over a period of time. It worked favorably for him. Let me say it that way. It didn't work against him. It worked favorably for him in his court trial because the lower court judge allowed 5 other witnesses to testify that kind of saturated, in essence, what they were trying to do. You cannot discount the impact that they had with their experiences with him. You should never discount. And the Me Too movement was built on this idea of, believe the woman. And the woman's story is likely to be true. And of course, we've discovered over the period of time that that's not always the case. Don't always believe the woman. But these women helped develop a credible pattern of behavior for Dr. Cosby that alluded to him being, some people would say, a predator. And some people would say that he was a serial predator. Anyway, so that's there. And I want to read to you something that a influencer, social media influencer named Lovey, what she posted on her Facebook page regarding what happened with Dr. Cosby's release. This is what she says. Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction being overturned says to the world, if you have enough wealth and access in this country, you can get away with anything. Legality and ethics are often on opposing sides, and whether or not the court had the legal right to overturn Cosby's conviction does not make this right. 50 women, same story, a world that does not protect them from predators, a world where wealth absolves criminals. Discussing his prominence, wealth, and manhood is what allowed them to spend the time, energy, and resources to find this loophole, to argue this as being okay because legality is to choose the ethical low road. It's trashy. Now, I don't really agree with her statement, but I completely understand the sentiment behind it. Privilege gets a lot of people a lot of places, and unfortunately, there are those, black and white, whose privilege is not absolved them of their crime, but it does lessen the penalty, in so many words, of the crime. And while there are many people who are feeling like she is feeling, the idea that what has happened is egregious. What happened with Dr. Cosby is not so far from what happens in many cases when it comes to the privileged, black and white. The other thing that now comes into play is the perception of Cosby now by the black community. Cosby's co-star Felicia Rashad made a tweet that said, finally, a terrible wrong is being righted. A miscarriage of justice is corrected. She tweeted that along with a photo of Bill Cosby. Black America has this view of Bill Cosby as the character Dr. Cliff Huxtable, along with Felicia Rashad as his wife, Claire, not Dr., but Claire Huxtable. And we have this this image of this prosperous, wealthy, upper middle class black family that myself and many others grew up watching and in some ways trying to emulate. You know, that's who we wanted to emulate. We wanted to be the Cosbys. We wanted to see him as ourselves. You know, for those like me who grew up watching Fat Albert, who grew up watching the many other creations of Bill Cosby across the spectrum of his career, not just in movies or comedy shows, but education, which he does have an earned doctorate in education. We never saw that dark side. And for many, we still don't want to see the dark side. So there's this schism as to should we support him, should we not support him, that began back in the early 2000s when he began to address some of the direct issues of Black America. And it began to sound like the white conservative pundits like Rush Limbaugh and others, you know. And he put his money where his mouth was. What he said he would do, he did. And I think that's the educator in him. But for the most part, progressive Black Americans did not like the rhetoric that he was putting out there. And some relinquished their support of him. So now the Black community is split as to how should we see Dr. William H. Cosby, convict. Should we still see him as a redeemable figure, even though he's in his twilight years? Should we see him as a man, a creative comic genius who empowered so many children over the decades with his means of educating? Or should we see him through the lens of the Me Too movement? Should we see him as this monster? Should we see him as this serial offender when it came to women? How should we see him? What will his legacy be? That's going to be a question only history will write. And I hope I'm around to be able to see what history will say about Dr. Cosby. Until then, there's a lot that has to change in America. And there's a lot that we have to do to change in Black America. But this is one thing. If you are a victim of sexual assault or of indecency of any kind, I do hope that you have the courage to report it. It doesn't matter how. I do hope you have the courage to report it. If you know someone who has been a victim or is a victim of sexual assault or indecency, I do hope that you have the courage to report it. This is a great issue. And while some are celebrating his release, there's still many, many more women who are impacted by actions similar to his, who will never say anything and will live with the trauma of those events the rest of their lives. Anyway, I love to hear your thoughts on this. So please leave a comment. Be cordial in leaving your comments and doing so. And please also take the time to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and the bell for notifications. And follow me on all of social media. All of that will be in the description. And till next time, appreciate you.